the most complicated cars ever made. Cars are complex machines, but some take that to a whole new level in the search to break new technological ground. Sometimes that brings success and other times it fails. Some cars appear to have been more complicated than they ever needed to be just for the sheer design hell of it, like the magnificent homage to over-engineering that was the Mercedes-Benz 600 pictured. Whatever it is that makes a car more complex than others. Here's our pick of the most finicky designs in chronological order. Number 1. Ford Fairlane 500 Skyliner, 1957. If you want to know what was the first coupe convertible car, look no further than the Ford Fairlane 500 Skyliner. It was the first car with this roof arrangement to enter series production, and went on to sell more than 45,000 examples. The roof itself was the first ever retractable top made up of more than one section, and it stowed under the rear deck. Making this work seamlessly required 7 reversible electric motors, 4 lifting jacks, 10 solenoids, another 10 limit switches and 4 locking mechanisms. There's also 607 feet, 185 meters, of wiring to make all of this lot work, so the Skyliner was also the most complex drop top on the market at its launch. Number 2. Rover P6, 1963. Rover may have had a slightly staid image up until the 1960s, but that all changed with the P6. Aimed at a new breed of thrusting young executives, it offered superb ride and handling, and excellent safety. Much of this was down to the design of the main structure that left all of the body panels unstressed. Another unusual P6 feature was the front suspension that used a bell crank design. This gave the car fine comfort and also allowed more width in the engine bay for the proposed gas turbine engine that was ditched and replaced by the famous GM-derived 3.5-liter V8. These design features make the P6 tricky to restore now, but also accounted for its popularity in period. Number 3. Mercedes-Benz 600, 1964. Any car described as a technical tour de force is likely to raise eyebrows when it comes to complexity, and that's just what the W100 series of Mercedes 600 did. It came with air suspension, twin heating systems, and used vacuum operation for the powered windows and central locking. On top of that, there was Bosch fuel injection at a time when carburetors were the norm. From any other car makers, this lot would have sounded alarm bells, but the quality of construction for the W100 was immaculate. Little wonder it was the choice of car for world leaders until its demise in 1981. However, all of that complexity means the 600 is fiendishly complicated to restore and maintain nowadays, though well-cared for examples now command up to $100,000 for the standard saloon model, and rather more for the stretched dictator spec Pullman model. Number 4. BRM H16, 1966. Once heard, never forgotten. The BRM H16 was the British racing team's answer to rule changes for the 1966 Formula One season. Famed engine tuners Tony Rudd and Jeff Johnson created the H16, taking 2 flat-8 motors and stacking them one on top of the other. Each had its crankshaft and they were geared together. Lotus fitted the engine to its Type 43. But even the incomparable talent of Jim Clark could only earn a single Grand Prix victory for this motor. It proved to be powerful, but also heavy, unreliable and difficult to work on. The following year, Lotus switched to the new Ford DFV and never looked back. Number 5. Citroën SM 1970. The SM was the result of Citroën buying Maserati in 1968. Using the Italian firm's 2.7-liter V6 engine endowed the Citroën with decent performance, but it also had to power the car's hydro-pneumatic suspension and brakes borrowed from the DS, along with headlights that turned with the steering and advanced dials. The SM was as advanced as it was fragile. The fragility meant regular maintenance was vital to keep the Maserati V6 engine ticking as it should and Citroën suspension working. Even so, the SM earned a reputation for being fearsomely difficult to keep running correctly, and it's only now the car is appreciated as the clever machine it is. Number 6. Citroën Birotor, 1973. Citroën more than dabbled with the notion of rotary power for its cars, but ultimately it decided against this design after experimenting with a birotor. It used a Comotor 624 twin-rotor engine as seen in the NSU Row 80, and it turned the GS base vehicle into a fast, refined cruiser. Citroën tested the car with 847 built and supplied to the public. However, when Peugeot bought Citroën, the bi-rotor project was scrapped and most of the cars suffered the same fate when Peugeot bought them back. It felt the engine's complex and unreliable nature would damage the Citroën brand. So the few surviving bi-rotors offer an enticing glimpse of how Citroën might have developed if it had remained independent. Number 7. Aston Martin Lagonda, 1976. Aston Martin embraced all that was cutting-edge for in-car tech when it launched the Lagonda in 1976 at a heady £24,570. At a time when the average house in the UK at the time cost £13,000. It bristled with touch-sensitive panels in place of buttons and digital displays rather than analog clocks in a cabin that was as angular as the exterior. It was just what very wealthy buyers wanted, but they weren't so keen on the reliability of these gadgets that had a habit of failing and were hugely expensive to put right due to their complexity. Aston Martin simplified the Lagonda's interior for later models, though it still retained its DG dash. By then, sales had dwindled to a trickle, and Aston sold a total of 645 of these wedge-profiled saloons all the way up to 1990. Number 8. Buick Reatta 1988. The Reatta was a bold attempt by General Motors to inject some chic into the Buick brand with a sporty two-door, two-seat coupe. It looked the part and should have been a success, helped by its electronic control center touchscreen computer and digital dash display. However, production was overcomplicated as it was hand-built in the dedicated Reatta Craft Center, rather than on a normal production line. GM even sent staff to the UK to see how small car companies such as Rolls-Royce made their vehicles. None of this added to the finished Reatta's appeal to buyers nor its dynamic abilities. It certainly wasn't a bad car, but the 3.8-liter V6 engine driving the front wheels was short on power and refinement to undermine the Buick's positioning as a halo sports model. In the end, only 21,751 Reattas were built over 4 years. Number 9. Mitsubishi 3000 GT 1990. Reel off a spec sheet that includes all-wheel drive, electronically controlled suspension, active aerodynamics, and four-wheel steering, and you'd think the Mitsubishi 3000 GT had been launched today. However, this coupe arrived in 1990 and Mitsubishi threw everything at it to make it competitive against the likes of the Porsche 944 and Toyota Supra. Even the engine was advanced for the period as it was a twin-turbo, quad-cam 3.0-liter V6 with 282 brake horsepower. This gave fine performance, but all of the techno-wizardry for the aero and suspension couldn't overcome the dull feel of the dynamics. However, its complexity is now one of the 3000 GT's major draws for those seeking a modern classic coupe. Number 10. Subaru SVX 1991. After the sales flop of its XT coupe, Subaru persevered with its two-door ambitions with the SVX. It was a determined effort to move further upmarket into territory occupied by the likes of the Nissan 300ZX and Toyota Supra. To do this, Subaru deployed a 3.3-liter flat-six engine and all-wheel drive to make the most of its 231 brake horsepower. Even so, buyers were wary of this mechanical package and other SVX details such as the window within a window side glass. All of this combined with a high ticket price at launch rendered the SVX a rarity that was quickly forgotten when the Impreza Turbo turned up and dominated rallying. Thank you for watching.